Welcome back to Common Knowledge. Let's take a look at some common Magic the Gathering cards, and I'll tell you, are they good in Pauper or not? Swift Maneuver is 1 and a white for an instant. Prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn. And you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Originally from Cold Snap, which is an interesting set. I remember having some fond memories about some cards in Cold Snap, but also going through some of these cards and going, these cards kind of suck compared to, the cards you'd gotten not too far earlier than that, like Mirrodin, which was a busted block. Anyway, Swift Maneuver is not that great. It is a card draw in white at instant speed, and that's kind of cool. I would not call this a fog. I was thinking, like, do you call this a fog? And it's not really a fog. But it could potentially save a creature, maybe even turn a trade into a chump block, and that's pretty cool. And it replaces itself. It is a bit of a cantrip. Now, the cantrip is not immediate. You have to wait until the next turn's upkeep. So that could even be your opponent's turn if you're playing this on your turn, and so you have fewer opportunities to play the card. But if you play it on your opponent's turn, which generally you probably are, because you're preventing the damage your opponent's trying to do that turn when they swing in, then you draw the card on your turn. So you have all your mana up, you get an extra card that turn. And that's not too bad. Not too bad, but this card is also not too good. Also not too good. I think I will give this a 2.4. Next up, Helica Glider. Helica? I'm going to say Helica. Helica Glider is 2 and a white for a 2/2 Nightmare Squirrel. This creature enters with your choice of a flying counter or a first strike counter on it. That is interesting. Originally and only from Mycoria, Lair of Behemoths. I didn't play during this set. I know some people are not big fans of Mutate, and I think I'm one of them. But this is kind of a cool card. Nightmare Squirrel is a hell of a combo of creature types. Wouldn't really expect that to be in white, but So you get a 3 mana Grizzly Bear here, but a Grizzly Bear that can either fly or have first strike. So it could be a Windrake instead of a Grizzly Bear. Or what's a 2/2 with first strike? I can think of a lot of things that like a 2/2 first strike and lifelink. There's the Stoat, Brightblade Stoat from Bloomburrow, and there's also a Kithkin that can do it from the original Lorwyn, and like those are out there. I think there's even one from Lorwyn Eclipsed, right? A black card that kind of does that. But those all cost 2. This costs 3, but you get the option. Oh, sorry, the black one from Bloomburrow, that only has lifelink. That doesn't have first strike and lifelink. What am I saying? Yeah, I don't know. 3. I suppose if you're a deck that can do some stuff with counters, and I'm trying to think, is what's the land called? Nest something. Nesting Grounds. That's uncommon only. Not in Pauper. So without Nesting Grounds, I think it's a little harder to justify. I don't know how many cards can really move a counter from one creature to another in Pauper. I think it'd be really cool if you had that ability to move the counters and then blink this and then give it another counter and then move that one over and blink this again. And it's probably a little too cute. It's probably like more of a silly, dumb commander thing that I'm thinking of, but I like silly, dumb commander things, even in other formats. I'm a bit of a Johnny, I guess, in that way. Yeah, this is not really playable in Pauper, pretty much at all. Let's give this thing a 2.7. Nezumi Informant is 1 and a black for a 1/1 Rat Rogue. When this creature enters, each opponent discards a card. We've seen some cards like this. We did one recently. It was another rat too. What was not crypt rats? Ravenous rats? It was ravenous rats, wasn't it? Ravenous rats. Was it ravenous rats? I mean, it might not have been ravenous rats, but ravenous rats does a very similar thing. And Azumi Informant's not bad. Rat Rogue, so if you are doing outlaw stuff, you get that with this. But as we talked about with that other rats, whichever rats we were talking about that does a similar effect to this, generally if you're going to play an effect like this in Pauper, you probably want to either go with the Virus Beetle because that's an artifact and does basically the same thing, or you go with the Skullcap Snail from Ixalan, because that will exile the card from their hand instead. And that's generally better. Still, I think if you're in a more rat-focused deck, there are worse cards to play than this, and we see other cards like this. In Commander, this is nice because it requires everybody, all your opponents, to discard a card, not just target opponent like Ravenous Rats or some of the other ones we've seen. But yeah, in Pauper, I have not seen this guy be played at all. And I think it's just because you have better options. Let's go with a 2 for this. And keep going. Leap of Flame is it mana, which is blue and a red for an instant. And it also has Replicate for is it mana, blue and a red. When you cast this spell, you can copy it for each time you paid its Replicate cost. You may choose new targets for the copies. What does the card do? Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains flying and first strike until end of turn. 2 mana for a bit of a pump and flying and first strike. It's not too bad. At instant speed, you can use that as a nice combat trick. Or you can use it before combat to get the evasion of the flying, and that can be useful too. And then replicating it as many times as you have mana. I do wish the replicate cost was at least generic mana instead of having to pay is it mana again, but it's splitting hairs, I suppose. So you could potentially give this to a number of different creatures on your team, or you could just keep giving the pump to the same creature, and that's not too bad either. There's a bit of flexibility there, and I think that's cool. Originally from Guild Pact, which is a set I really like. Let's go with like a 3.8, maybe. It's not too bad. Guerrilla Warcry, I'm pretty sure we've done this one before. Because I remember talking about all the arts and all of the arts being cool. And they are. They are cool. Look, just quickly. Guerrilla Warcry is 1 in a red for an instant. Cast the spell only during combat before blockers are declared. All creatures gain menace until end of turn. And you draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. Not too bad. It's giving everything menace is sweet. Replacing itself is pretty cool. Probably not the most useful card. And I think even now I'm very much remembering what I said. I was saying, like, if you do this, you kind of want it to be more of a finisher. So drawing the card at the next turn's upkeep is not that important. What if it was cheaper and just did that effect and didn't care about the card? I think that's what I said. So let's skip it, and we'll move on to River Herald Scout, which is 1 in a blue for a 1/2 Merfolk Scout. When this creature enters, it explores. We just had a green Merfolk yesterday that you could pay 2 and a green to have it explore. And I didn't love it because even though it was a 1-drop and you could have it explore multiple times over multiple turns, which is kind of cool, it felt like a big mana sink and I don't think it was all that good. I think there were a lot of, like I said, there were a lot of decks that could use it, but not a lot of decks that would find it to be the most useful card that they could play at any one time. And I think they'll just choose other cards over that. This one's a little bit different in that when it enters, it explores. I think that's a little better. It's a free effect at that point. You've paid the 2 mana, and so your creature's either a 1/2 and you get a land, or it's a 2/3 and you can surveil. And that's okay. That's kind of okay. This guy might even be slightly blinkable. Not amazingly blinkable because, he won't continue to get more counters on him. But you can, at the very least, get him back to a 2/3 or even get him up to a 2/3 if he wasn't a 2/3 before. And you still get a lot of that card selection. He's okay. He's okay. Are there better cards you can play? Absolutely. Is he going to be a Pauper staple? Very much no. Uh, he's going to get like a 2.5, but I'm pretty positive that's better than the score I gave the other one. Maybe they're relatively close. You know what? I'll bump this up to a 2.6 just in case. But River Herald Scout is not too bad in my book. Horn Sliver, ugh, gross, slivers. No, thank you. $9 secret layer version. Yeah, okay. Horn Slivers 2 and a green for a 2/2 sliver. All slivers creatures have trample. This doesn't really get played in slivers. I've got a friend who's got a slivers deck that I very stupidly purchased him for his birthday, for Christmas. Can't remember which. I bought him a slivers deck because he thought it was cool, and I guess I'm an enabler. now he has to play me with it, but I have to play against it, and that's not very fun. I didn't put Horn Sliver in it. When most of the decks that I looked at to try to make sure I was giving him a halfway decent slivers deck, even though it's kind of a meme in the format, the ones that I saw did not really play Horn Sliver. Maybe one in the sideboard as a way of getting over stalled boards. Maybe one in the main to again stop stalled boards, but to have that option available to you. Most of the time, though, you just want the muscle slivers and the plated slivers and the gemhide slivers and the flanking one and the one that gives vigilance, and you already have a ton of slivers that you can play. And you also sometimes play the 1 mana metallic sliver and the changeling, the 1 mana changeling guys that are also slivers. And I'm not sure you really need trample because you have just bodies. You have so many bodies, and the bodies are so big. You don't have to worry about them trampling over. You'll be fine. And this is pretty expensive for a sliver deck. Sliver decks can certainly make a lot of mana, but those decks are mostly just playing 1 and 2 mana cards, and they're just dumping them all on the table, and then you've got too many slivers to deal with, and you get overwhelmed. Do you want to spend 3 mana on this card, potentially lose it, and now you've wasted a lot of mana on cards when you could have just been playing 3 other cards instead of just this? And I think that's really the tactic you got to think of. Something like flying is a little bit different if you get winged sliver. Even though those decks are generally Selesnya, sometimes they'll sneak in a way to make blue just so they can play, or the gemhide sliver can also help to make blue. And so giving everything flying and that evasion, that makes a lot more sense. This makes a lot less sense to me, but it is an option. It's not the worst option. I think it's better than the ones that would give like first strike. But no, I don't think you really need to play this. Maybe just get yourself a copy if you have a slivers deck, just so you could pop it in whenever you needed to. Although it's not a cheap card, no matter what. In fact, I'm pretty sure I just gave my list copy to my friend. Like, damn, that was $2.82. I should have hung on to that. Sold it, or at least sold it to him. Make him spend some money. But I just gave it to him because I guess I'm a good friend. Anyway, let's go with I'm gonna go with a 4.3, just outside of proper playability, but you get it. Sunbeam Spellbomb is a single mana for an artifact. You can pay a white mana and sacrifice this artifact to gain 5 life, or you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice this artifact to draw a card. Spellbombs are okay. We definitely see some Spellbombs that are really good. Nihil Spellbomb, which is from Scars of Mirrodin, not from Mirrodin proper, because we've gotten a number of cycles of Spellbombs in the past. You got Spellbombs that are unsummons and some Spellbombs that are, I think they can give flying or something. They're kind of nice little cards. Something that you can get with Trinket Mages or, helps your affinity, can draw a card when you need it to. So it's almost like a cycler in that way. 2 mana to cycle is, basically the effect that you get. If you need to just put artifacts on the table for some reason, this is a good way of doing that outside of Affinity, but in Affinity as well. And this one gains you life, and gaining life, 5 life for 2 mana. 5 life is actually a pretty good deal. Pretty good deal. Yeah, this is kind of similar to the Horn Sliver in a way, where it is a pretty decent card, just doesn't really see play. There are other options you probably play over this, and it ends up where it gets something like a 4. Maybe even a little less. Let's go 3.8. 3.8 for that. Not a terrible card, though. Shimmering Wings is a single blue mana for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature has flying, and you can pay a blue and return this aura to its owner's hand. This is a really cool, fun commander card because you can keep bouncing it back to your hand and keep playing it and get all your enchantress effects multiple times a turn. That's really fun. If you're not playing it in that kind of a deck, in Commander, and if you're truly are trying to play this in Pauper, are there things you can do with this? Maybe. There's some cards. There's like I think we've talked about on the show before. Is it Balemerk Leech? Let's take a look at it just to be sure. Balemerk Leech. Oop, not like that. Two E's, not 2 L's. Yeah, Balemerk Leech. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, each opponent loses a life. So you could play this, bounce this, play this, bounce this, play this, bounce this, and now you've taken out a bunch of life when you do that. You can even this doesn't have flash, but at least you can play this at instant speed to return it. So if somebody tries to kill the creature, you can bounce it back to your hand and still be able to use the enchantment later. That's kind of cool. I mean, it's a neat card. It really is a neat little card. I don't think I'd ever seen this Tempest art before. I just remember the Invasion art. Interesting. It's a neat little card, but it's nothing super special. I don't think Wizards is going to do this because they've already seen how busted it has been with artifacts in Pauper. But I would really like some cards that would bounce enchantments back to your hand that are cheap and that are Pauper playable. We've got the what is it? The Fear of Isolation. Yeah, Fear of Isolation. Oh, that is just permanent, not enchantment, and it's not Pauper playable. I know, but that gets played in standard for those kinds of decks, or used to at the very least. But I would like to see some Pauper cards that would say, "Hey, specifically bounce an enchantment back to your hand to play this." I want like a Glint Hawk, but for enchantments, and then I want to be able to play cards like this, or cards like Hopeless Nightmare to bounce stuff. Then you play the Balemerk Leeches. Then you're onto something. Then I think we got a stew going, as they say. And I just don't know if we're going to see it, because I think Wizards is a little too scared that they see what happens with artifacts and they go, we don't want that to happen to enchantments too. We can't have that. Not in Pauper, at least. I don't know that they really look that deeply into Pauper, but I feel like when you see cards like Nurturing Pixie go into uncommon, you go, hang on. That probably could have been common. And then you just see what it might do to the format and how it would change things. And I think they go, let's keep that at let's keep that at uncommon. We don't need that there. And you see a lot of those bouncers these days. The Kieran from Dragonstorm and Fear of Isolation and Nurturing Pixie, they all are uncommon. And so I think they're just rightfully scared that those kind of cards that bounce permanents are really good in Pauper. They don't want to make another Core Skyfisher. They should, but they won't. Maybe they shouldn't. Anyway, did I give this a score? I don't think so. Let's give it a 3.2, I guess. I don't think we have the pieces to make this a really good card yet, but I think it has the potential to be a pretty good one. This is our last card. I think it is our last card, officially at least. And it's Selesnya Signet. We have done the Signets before. They are good, but not necessarily in Pauper. It's 2 mana ramp, which is not bad. Not bad, but you don't really see it get played in Pauper at all. And they're just a little bit slow. little bit slow, and that format is just too fast for signets like this. Keep it to commander, but these are fine. So we'll skip this, keep moving. Unseal the Necropolis is 2 and a black for an instant. Each player mills 3 cards, then you return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. That's interesting. Huh. I kind of don't mind it. 3 mana for 2 creatures. That's okay. What's the Macabre Waltz? Yeah, Macabre Waltz, that's 2 mana. Turn 2 creatures from your graveyard and then discard a card. So, that's also at sorcery speed, though. So for the extra mana, you're getting instant speed, and each player mills, which could potentially be useful to your opponent, but generally it's just going to be more useful to you. And then you get 2, and you don't have to discard. So, I don't know. I kind of don't hate it. I don't know what I give it, though. You know, Macabre Waltz is also not played in Pauper, so I'm not like, oh, well, it's just a different Macabre Waltz. It must be pretty good. But that was just the first card I could think of that was similar. But I don't know. Like, this seems totally fine. I could see a deck really liking a card like this. I don't know what deck that is off the top of my head, but I could see it. You know, does Dredge want this? Probably not. You know, Dredge wants to just have more creatures. You have the creatures that already do enough milling, and then you want to be able to have. He wants the sacrifice fodder for your return, dread return. So this does get you back 2/3 of the creatures you need to dread return. And you get back a couple town greeters. You play those couple town greeters. You mill even more stuff. It's a thought, but I think you have enough other creatures that just do the dredge thing. Yeah, you have enough creatures that that mill 4 when they come into play. That I think those are generally just better than this, and they help dredge game plan more than a card like this does, because they continue to be creatures that are good when they are milled or good when they are milling. So I like this card, but I guess I don't really know where it goes. And that ends up getting something like the Shimmering Wings. Like, I think this is also like a 3.2, a 3.3, something like that. And it's interesting, but it doesn't immediately ring a bell on where it goes. Let's do a bonus card and then call it a day. It's Corpse Blockade for 2 and a black. You get a 1/4 zombie with Defender, and you can sacrifice another creature, and this creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. All right, so it is a free sacrifice outlet, which is pretty nice. We don't have a ton of those. Problem is, we have enough of them that are really good in Pauper that we don't really need this guy. You know, your Carrion Feeder is generally enough, and your Ashnod's Altar is generally enough. Do you really want to pay 3 mana for that kind of effect when both of those things that I mentioned are 1 and 2 mana respectively? They're just cheaper. They're easier to pull off. They stick on the table a little bit better. Carrion Feeder because it makes itself bigger, and the other one because it's just an artifact and not a creature. A Defender that can give itself Death Touch, though, is interesting. I wonder if anybody's like tested around with a card like this, or if they just know we're fine. We've got enough sack outlets in the decks that we play. But I'd be interested to see if a mono black sacrifice deck would try a copy of this and see if it works or not. I don't know. My guess is that it wouldn't, because this is another creature that wants to stay on the table. And most of the time in mono black sacrifice decks, you have the Carrion Feeder and the Mortician Beetle and maybe a Gixian Infiltrator, and everything else is expendable, made to be expendable. All those other things need to be able to be sacrificed. And I don't think you take away any of those cards to play this card. So this either needs to be better than one of those 3 cards, or it needs to be able to be fodder. And for 3 mana, I don't think this is fodder, and I also don't think it's as good as any of the other cards I mentioned. So that's really where it doesn't find a place. But if it had a place, it would be mono black sack. And I don't know. Let's go for like a 2.9. 2.9. It's somewhat solid. That's enough for today. We will catch you on the next one. See ya.